Okay, so you hear me okay? Yep.
Yes, all good.
Uh, do interrupt with questions as we go through. If we need to break this into two, then we will, but I'm thinking we won't. So we'll just see how it goes.
Okay.
So what we're going to cover, you can get this thing there. Oh, uncooperative. There we go. Uh, how the pyramids were built. And we'll go into a little bit of the detail about that because Ra talks extensively about their involvement in that. The purpose of the pyramids, and initially they have three initial purposes: initiation, healing, and balancing. And how that works, what's the process that works, what pyramid power is, and it talks about the power of shapes, kind of divine geometry, etc. A little bit on Atlantis and their history with the pyramids and things that went on there, and then we'll finish up with the use of the pyramids today. So that's kind of where we will journey. Get right into it. So again, the references are right out of the Law of One quotes. So this is session 2, question 4. Don asks, were you responsible for the building of the pyramids? And what was the purpose of the pyramid? So a good straightforward question. Right at the beginning, once they recognized who Ra was and the history of Ra with Egypt, they asked about pyramids, I think, pretty much in the first session. And then in the first part of the first book, there's quite an extensive dialogue about the pyramids that comes and goes. So the challenge for me was not, is there enough information in there? Is what information do I include and not to keep it concise? Hopefully I've done that. So Ra responds, the larger pyramids were built by our ability using the forces of one. The stones are alive. It has not been so understood by the mind, body, spirit people, in other words, distortions of your culture. The purposes of the pyramid were two. So here's a little hint, and he'll go into a little more detail. The forces of one, or the force, if you like, those little Star Wars fans, the stones are alive. They connect with the intelligent energy within the stones. And then we'll go into more detail as to how that works and what actually happened there. So he goes into the purpose of the pyramid. Firstly, to have a properly oriented place of initiation for those who wish to become purified or initiated channels of the law of one. Now, I want to be clear that the purpose, essentially in Ra's mind of the pyramid, was to help people live the law of one, understand and live the law of one. This was and is the divine law of the heavens and how everything works and fits together. And so they taught this back to the Egyptians. It's not something that they just came up with. It's not just their kind of version of divine will or whatever. This is what the eternities understand as how things are. So they built the pyramids to help the people acquire knowledge and capabilities within aligning to the law of one. So the first purpose was that, and that's what they call initiation. And we'll look at what they mean by that as we go through. The second one were two. We wished then to carefully guide the initiates in developing a healing of the people whom they sought to aid and the planet itself. So there's the third one: healing the people and healing the planet were the other two reasons. So initiate the people into the law of one and understanding how to live it, bring a healing experience for the people, and a balancing or healing experience for the planet itself. So it goes on. I'll use my pointer. Pyramid after pyramid, charged by the crystal and initiate, were designed to balance the incoming energy of the one creator with the many and multiple distortions of the planetary mind, body, spirit. So they talk a lot about crystals. Sometimes the reference to crystal is the crystal in the rock. They might have had other crystals placed in there. They're not real clear on that, but they actually more often refer to the ascended priest or master, the initiated balanced master, having crystallized their chakra point. And so they became a crystal channel for going through the healing processes and things in there. So the pyramid worked by the will and power of the spirits of the people who ran or worked within the pyramids, at least while they were using it the correct way. So it was designed to balance this incoming energy of the creator and the many and multiple distortions of the planetary mind, body, spirit. In this effort, we were able to continue work that brothers within the Confederation had effected through building of other crystal-bearing structures, and thus complete a ring, if you will, of these about the Earth's surface. So they weren't the only ones or the first ones. There were other sixth density beings that had come to Atlantis and that had also worked with people in South America. There were pyramids all over the world. So he goes into a little bit about what that all is. We'll just keep going until you ask questions. Building with the force. So how does this done? How do you do that? So how were the blocks moved? Something that they still can't understand today because some of those blocks are too damn heavy. Ra says, you must picture the activity within all that is created. So he's talking about vibration there, the hermeneutic principle of vibration. Everything vibrates, right? So picture the activity within all that is created. The energy is, though finite, quite large. So very interesting insight there. Compared to the understanding distortion of your peoples. This is an obvious point well known to your peoples, but little considered. This energy is intelligent. It is hierarchical. So very important there. The energy is intelligent, so it responds and interacts with other creative energies, including ascended masters like the six density beings were. And it's hierarchical, which is interesting. So it listens to higher energy or higher wisdom, if you like, to higher beings. And that's one of the key components. So the energy in the rock is intelligent and hierarchical. Much as your mind, body, spirit complex dwells within an hierarchy of vehicles and retains, therefore, the shell or shape of the field and the intelligence of each ascendingly intelligent or balanced body, so does this atom of such material as rock. All that saying there, he's talking again about the 6 chakra points and the 6 levels of body we have. And remember, we went through that in one of the other presentations, how you actually have 6 sort of levels of energy bodies, physical bodies, etc. And so those are hierarchical as well, in a sense, is what he's saying there. And so he finishes with, so does each atom of such a material as rock. When one can speak to that intelligence, the finite energy of the physical or chemical rock body is put into contact with that infinite power, which is resident in the more well-tuned bodies, be they human or rock. So there is the hierarchical nature. When they speak to the intelligence in the rock, the energy of the physical chemical rock body is in contact with the infinite power as through the law of one, which is in the more well-tuned bodies, whether they're rock or human. So the well-tuned individuals are able to speak, if you like, to the rock. With this connection made, a request may be given. So they ask, isn't that interesting? They don't command, they ask. The intelligence of infinite rockness communicates to its physical vehicle, meaning the actual material the rock is made of, and that splitting and moving which is desired is then carried out through the displacement of the energy field of rockness from finity to a dimension which may conveniently call simply infinity. So the intelligent infinity works through the aligned being, requests of the rock to either split or move, and it responds. Is summary kind of what he's saying there. In this way, that which is required is accomplished due to the cooperation of the infinite understanding of the Creator indwelling in the living rock. All is one. See? Any questions about that? So this is
Yes,
going to answer. Yeah, go ahead, Larry. This does answer. How did they move the rocks? How did they build the rock? How did they build the pyramid?
Yeah.
And if we were to say in our terms today, it's by magic, but
Yes.
with a little deeper understanding. You go ahead, Larry.
Well, it almost seems like they had the ability, well, there's a whole bunch of stuff coming up. They had the ability. Okay, so we've got infinite intelligence awareness communicating directly with finite awareness that dwells within the consciousness of the rocks. So these rocks had their own consciousness, which we know we might have been rocks at one time ourselves during one of our much earlier lifetimes, a million years ago, incarnations. So if I'm hearing you correctly, infinite intelligence awareness communicates with the finite awareness within the rocks. And it seems like, is that right? Do I understand that correct, Scott?
In a sense, yes, that's what he's saying. Yeah.
Okay. And it also seems like somebody had the ability to make the rocks weightless so there was no gravity. It feels that may be the case.
Yeah, and they'll talk about that a little bit, but essentially, he talks about the vibratory energy, the movement within the rock is an immense amount of energy, and I think it's implied there's a method they use in creating vibration that levitates, and there's quite a lot of other information around on that. The Tibetan monks chant and sing and play music, and there's reported witnesses that have seen them levitate large rocks doing that.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I think Elizabeth Heich, Heich, wrote a book called Initiation. It talks exactly about her recall of a previous life where she went through a process of initiation in one of the pyramids.
Mhm.
Also, it seems other crystals being involved with structures. That's very interesting. Is any of this connected with the various arcs of the covenant? Supposedly, there's several arcs of the covenant, at least 3 that are situated around various parts of the planet. Did Ra ever talk about the connection between the pyramid and the arcs of the covenants, like in the Yucatan and other places?
He doesn't make the connection between the pyramid and the Ark of the Covenant directly, but there are a series of questions about the Ark of the Covenant and the Ten Commandments, but not so much linked to the pyramids. It doesn't mean they weren't. He just wasn't asked that, so he doesn't volunteer.
Right. Got it. I don't know how many this evening have been in the pyramid. I had some time, July or August 2006, was it 2008? Can't remember. To actually be up in the big pyramid in the supposed king's chamber, whatever at the top. And I knew that it was never intended to be for burial or anything like that. It was something else going on.
Yes.
Quite fascinating being there, but the pyramids themselves did not hold a lot of fascination for me. There were other sites, temples that I found much more interesting than the pyramids there. Scott, is it your impression that the pharaohs had no idea who built the pyramids?
At the time, Ra will talk about that. At the time, they did know it was from Ra because they actually appeared and walked among them. And the pyramids, he will show in a minute, the pyramid, the Great Pyramid appeared, and it was a shock. It's basically appeared overnight.
Right. And did not the Egyptians at one point, one of them, was it Amenhotep, Akhenaten, did not one of them worship Ra as the one sun god?
Yeah, he talks about Akhenaten too, and he talks about they built the pyramid around his time for a specific reason. So
Got
yes,
it.
we'll get to some of those guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump. I didn't mean
No,
to
no, no worries. It shows that we're in alignment because you're questioning where the information is going to take us anyway.
Thanks, Larry. Ray.
Hi. I think foundation has been laid down by Larry, my question. But before that, one tiny question. One, we are talking about the pyramids in Egypt. So there are pyramids in Mexico also. Is there any connection between these pyramids? Number one.
Yeah. Yes, there are, and we'll make that connection. Ra was involved with both to some extent. Yeah.
Okay. And number two, as we are talking about this, if we try to put same theory, the explanation within ourselves. What is there must be some connection, right?
Within ourselves, is that what you
Complex.
said?
Yeah, like our mind-body complex and these rocks complex. How
Yes.
one we can apply in today's time with this awareness, how we can connect, like we can't go, like we initiation, healing and all these. So there must be something within us as a pyramid shape and chakras or something. So I just want to, my question is about like connection and relationship and how we can initiate or invoke or do something on that. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
I don't
we
know
will
if
get
my question
we'll
is
get to
clear.
that, Ray. And if we get to the end and haven't answered that question, please ask it again. But I'm pretty sure we'll cover it.
Thank you. Thanks, Ray. Lou.
Yes, thanks, Lee. Scott, what is what are the forces of one? Is that the collective consciousness?
It's a good question. Ra talks about two things: intelligent infinity, which is his name for basically God or the divine; intelligent energy, which is essentially like the vibratory energy that is aware enough to respond to intelligent infinity. So if you are aligned with intelligent infinity and are channeling that energy, basically in tune with that spirit, if you like, then you can make requests of intelligent energy and it will respond. That's kind of the summary of what Ra's saying is how this works on this page. Does that help?
A little bit, not very clear.
It might. I think it'll clear up a bit as we get into more of the content because they revisit this several times. Remember, the guy asking the questions is a physicist, actually taught physics, and so he's very interested in the mechanics of how it worked. So let's just see where it takes us, Lou, and hopefully it'll clear up as we go through.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. All good.
Okay. So building with Ra, Don again says, I'm reminded of the statement, if you had enough faith, you could say to a mountain to move and the mountain would move. So he's referencing the biblical statement there that Jesus made. I'm assuming that if you're fully aware of the law of one, you are able to do these things. Is this correct? And Ra says a few things. He says, you are precisely correct in your understanding of the congruency of faith and intelligent infinity. However, one is a spiritual term, the other more acceptable perhaps to the conceptual framework distortions of those who seek with measure and pen. Science, in other words, those who seek with measure and pen, I think he's referring to this, I just moved it off, sorry. Those who seek with measure and pen. So one is a spiritual term that's often used, faith is used a lot in religious sense, and in that way it has a connotations or baggage with it that I think Ra wanted to avoid. But essentially he's agreeing, yes. Then he goes on. There is a distinction between the individual power, meaning one person's power through the law of one, and the combined or societal memory complex, mind, body, spirit, understanding of the law of one. So one individual by themselves or a group of individuals that are in harmony together, there's a distinct difference in the level of power there. In the first case, an individual by themselves, only the one individual purified of all flaws, could move a mountain. So there you go. You have to be fairly advanced to have that level of connection. In the other case, of mass understanding of unity, each individual may contain an acceptable amount of distortions, and yet the mass mind could move mountains. So a collective group together has much more power in working this kind of spiritual magic, if you like, the ability to levitate things or move things or form things out of thought. There's a combining that creates a lot more synergy in the combining. It can be done by an individual alone. They have to be very, very advanced in their spiritual path. That's kind of what he's saying here. The progress is normally from the understanding which you now seek to a dimension of understanding which is governed by the laws of love and which seeks the laws of light. The law of love is what we are seeking here and how we choose. Remember, this third density is called the choice of, do I spend my life in love of self or in love of others, in service to self or in service to others, the laws of love. And then we go to fourth density. Fourth density seeks light. Their understanding is going to light. So he's actually talking about fourth and fifth density levels there. Those who are vibrating with the law of light seek the law of one. Those who vibrate with the law of one seek the law of forgiveness. The law of one in this sense is sixth density, which is the balancing density, where everything comes back together, and even the people on the negative path come into harmony with the people on the positive path, so there's no more polarity there. There's unity. So sixth density is the unifying density, and then foreverness goes into seventh density, where they connect again fully back into oneness and start a new creation. So with the context of the 7 densities that we've gone through, this paragraph has a lot more layers of depth than just what the initial words might have meant to them in only the third reading, right? Now we can look into it and see that Ra layered this information so that it has lots more depths of truths to it, what he's saying here. Don says, then the rock was created by thought in place rather than moved from somewhere else. Is that correct? Now, Ra says something interesting here. We built with everlasting rock, the Great Pyramid, as you call it. Other of the pyramids were built with stone moved from one place to another. So we're getting into a little more detail what he meant by that. They ask, what do you mean by everlasting rock? And he goes into a little bit of a metaphysical construct, but it sounds like they formed the rock out of the sand there in Giza and made the rock that way, rather than going to a rock quarry and splitting it off and then floating it around, if you like. Although some of the rocks in the pyramid, I think, did come from a certain place, but I think that talked about for the most part there. And everlasting rock is what he's going to talk about in a minute. Well, no, actually, I think I had to skip that part because there's too much information in there. He goes on, it's still in his third section. There's just slightly trouble, but I was wondering why, in this case, the pyramid was made of many blocks rather than the whole thing being created at once, which is a great question. If they were able to form it through their mind, and that's what he says everlasting rock was formulated through the power of their mind, their will, their faith, if you like, formed the rocks as they needed them. So Don says, well, why don't you just make it out of one big rock then? Why is it made out of thousands of other rocks? And he gives a very good reason. There is a law which we believe to be one of the more significant distortions of the law of one. That is the law of confusion. You have called it the law of free will. So it's important that we, in this density, because it's the density of choice, have a semblance of confusion about what's really going on. If we knew the truth exactly and there was no ambiguity about everything that's going on, the choices wouldn't be much of a choice because it would be clear on what's the right thing to do. The reason that this is a learning challenging is we've got to figure out the right thing by learning cause and effect, right? Consequence and karma, things like that. So the law of confusion or the law of free will is very important to them. Go ahead.
There's a question. Is Ra talking about the power of intention?
Yes, that's another word for their will or thought form, is what they say. They formed the rock in thought form from the sand there in Giza by basically understanding the law of love. The depth of the law of love is it's the law of unity or bringing together. Love brings together. So they invoked the law of love and brought the individual grains of sand together into harmony, combining them into rock in the shape they needed, is how I would interpret that. And that was done by their will or intention. Yeah. He goes on, we wished to make a healing machine or time-space ratio complex, which was so efficacious, as possible. However, we did not desire to allow the mystery to be penetrated by the peoples in such a way that we became worshipped as builders of a miraculous pyramid. Thus, it appeared to be made, not thought. So the reason it had many blocks is so that as subsequent generations come along, it's like well, someone obviously built this, they piled the rocks on top of each other, rather than it be like this. It's impossible to conceive of how they would have chiseled this out of one piece of rock, right? So that's kind of what I think he's implying here. We did not desire to allow the mystery to be penetrated by the peoples in such a way that they became worshipped as builders of a miraculous pyramid. They did not want the people to see them as anything different than older brothers, in a sense. And so they put forth a great deal of effort to not take on the role of deities amongst the people. However, they had some struggles with that because the people kept going. But that's kind of the concept there. So getting a little more depth into the building. When you started building the pyramid at Giza using thought, were you at that time in contact with the incarnate Egyptians, and did they observe this building? Ra says, at that time, we were not in close contact with incarnate entities upon your plane. We are responding to a gentle calling of sufficient energy in that particular location to merit action. We sent thoughts to all who were seeking our information. The appearance of the pyramid was a matter of tremendous surprise. However, it was carefully designed to coincide with the incarnation of one known as a great architect. This entity was later made into a deity, in part due to this occurrence. So this person, and we'll find out who it is down here, it's I'll say Imhotep, became a deified because of the pyramid appearing, and they attributed it to him, which is exactly why Ra didn't want to make it attributed to themselves.
There's
what was
a
the name of the deity? This deity had in Hotep. Go ahead.
Sorry. There's a follow-up to that question about the power of intention. So they incorporated mystery, ?
Yeah, they left the mystery. They left it open. So it was an unanswered question of how did they build this? Who built this? How did that happen? That was part of what was the allure to it. And it was also part of what it clearly could have been built by people, but they had to have some really interesting abilities. It looks like it was built rock upon rock, like you'd build a brick house. But the bricks are so damn big, how could they possibly have done that? So there's the mystery, there's the dilemma. If it was just carved out of one huge piece of rock, then it would have been obviously a divine being had made this. And they wanted to leave that mystery. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So this is what it looks like inside as a diagram. And some of the key things to notice is the central point. The king's chamber is slightly offset. The queen's chamber is on the central point. So those are the two main things. There's a reason for that offsetness, because the king's chamber is the chamber of healing. The queen's chamber is the chamber of initiation. They later go on and talk about there were 3 different energy vortexes within the pyramid. One in the queen's chamber, the first one. And so because of the position, so think of it like a hurricane or a tornado, they would have been in the eye of that energy. And that was where the initiation took place. The king's chamber, they would have been slightly in the wall of the energy. So the flow of energy would have felt quite different in the king's chamber. So that was a second vortex. The third vortex is a spiral of light that shoots out of the top. Sorry, do it again. That shoots out of the top. And that's the one that goes into balancing the planet and harmonizing with the energy field of the planet. So the shape of the pyramid creates these three energy vortexes that fulfill each of the three purposes. The position you're in within the pyramid depends upon which energy vortex you're experiencing that gives you either the initiation or the healing or the balancing of the planet. Okay.
Does Ra talk about the energy also? We know it goes up through the top of the pyramid, but does he talk about it going down directly into the earth?
No. Well, yeah, in one sense, it's interesting. Don actually asked, what if we built a pyramid upside down? Would it still work? And I was like, why on earth would you build it upside down? It won't stand on its tip. And he said, well, what if we dug a hole in the ground? He goes, well, the energy works like a funnel. It actually draws energy into it from space all around it, including the Earth's energy. One of the key things about the balancing pyramids, he talk about this in a minute, there's 6 of them. They are on a specific meridian point on the Earth. So their position is very, very important. There are many other pyramids that aren't balancing pyramids, and they also have a healing chamber, initiation chamber, or effect like that, but they don't necessarily align to balance the energy field of the Earth. The ones like the Gaza pyramid is on a very important energy nexus to draw a balance, like an acupuncture point, if you like, for the planet. Does that answer your question?
Yep, thank you. We've got a question from Ray.
Yes, again, tiny question. It just came to my mind. This King's Chambers, Queen's Chambers, was these the original names given like that? Or does it has anything to do divine masculine, divine feminine? Something?
No, those were the names given by the Westerners who discovered it. They called it the Queen's Chamber because it was the first one they came to. The King's Chamber was above. I believe that was where the names come from. Ra refers to it as the so-called Queen's Chamber, the so-called King's Chamber, because that's what we've come to know them at, but they never named them that. He doesn't tell us what we called them. I think he would have called them the initiation chamber and the healing chamber.
And also you mentioned like they never wanted to be worshipped or to make it mystery, right?
They didn't want people to think that these were divine beings and worship them because they made this magical building appear overnight, basically. Yeah.
So they wanted to like just a natural, normal thing, but people made it like ultra or like worshipping this and that. As you, one of the earlier presentation, you mentioned that we are addicted to worship.
Yes, they wanted to avoid that.
Yeah.
The addiction to worship, I think, is an overflow of the Orion group's tendency to program us into looking at hierarchical system where we have elitist people with magical or greater powers that we should worship. The true path does not align with that. They don't seek that. They don't need that. The Orion group or the negative path does, and they put a lot of effort into manifesting that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to connect that statement and this one together. That somewhere it has never been intention of the higher powers to be worshipped.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
That's a true statement.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Lou?
Thankfully, Scott, water is not included in the functioning of the pyramids in Giza.
They don't refer to it anywhere in the raw material as an important part of the mechanism. It doesn't mean it's not. I know there's a lot of theories about the subterranean pit and that being a water thing. It might have been part of what created some of the resonance of it, but Ra does not talk about that because he wasn't asked about it. He just talks about that the actual shape of the pyramid itself is what makes it work. And we'll talk about how it works in a minute, but yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't mention water. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Lou. Larry?
Right. Scott, you mentioned the Orion group. Supposedly some of these pyramids there they resemble like part of the Orion constellation. At any point does Ra talk about the Orion group or the Orion constellation?
only in reference to the Orion Group's headquarters, basically being around there. With regards to our part of the solar system, that is the nexus of the Orion Group's hub of planets. And it is interesting that in the Giza Plateau, the three pyramids align with the belt. He wasn't asked about that, but I am wondering if after they built the Great Pyramid and then had to leave, and the things got distorted quite quickly, and Ra actually talks a little bit later on about how they perverted their teachings and it became quite dangerous, that the Orion Group would have taken that opportunity to come in and perhaps inspired them to build the other pyramids in alignment with the Orion belt. That wouldn't surprise me at all. That's part of their MO, to take something sacred and to twist it like that. But he doesn't say that. I'm just assuming that that is a possible explanation for why the Giza Plateau was aligned with the Orion nebula, given that it's only referenced for the most part in the Law of One as the home of the negative beings.
Thanks, Larry. All good. Scott.
So let's look at what initiation is. So the Queen's Chamber, the bottom one there. Don says, by saying that the Queen's Chamber was the initiatory place, could you tell me what you meant by that? The question is a large one. We cannot describe initiation in its specific sense due to our distortion towards the belief or understanding that the process which we offered so many of you years ago was not a balanced one. They say that because the priests just perverted it and distorted it quite quickly and used it to create a hierarchical, dominant, elitist group. And so a part of the reason Ra group withdrew from Egypt. And so they felt like, well, we gave them this process, but it worked for a point, but then they corrupted it. So it wasn't a balance.
Right, hold on. Ray, can you just make sure you're muted? Thank you.
Then he goes on. However, you are aware of the concept of initiation and realize that it demands a centering of the being upon the seeking of the creator. So there's the first step in initiation. One must be centered in wanting to seek the creator. Probably everybody in this call would qualify with that. We have hoped to balance this understanding by the enunciating the law of one. That is, that all things are one creator. That is interesting. He says all things are one creator. Thus, seeking the creator is done not just in meditation and the work of an adept, but in the experiential nexus of each moment. So he gives some clues there. Meditation clearly was part of the initiation, referred to there. There was a number of different things. Later on, he will talk about balancing the chakra points or crystallizing the chakra points, which comes when they're balanced. Something similar to what some of us had experiencing through Judy's chanting meditation or Divine Mother's one. So all of these things kind of come into place. And he'll talk about a little bit more about how we are in a different place now than the Egyptians were. So he's reluctant to share what their process was because he felt like clearly it wasn't a balanced one because it was distorted so quickly, and we don't want to create more problems. It's kind of my read on what he's saying there. He goes on, the initiation of the Queen's Chamber has to do with the abandoning of self to such desire to know the creator in full, that the purified in-streaming light is drawn in balanced fashion through all energy centers, meeting in indigo and opening the gate to intelligent infinity. So there it is there in summary. That's what the initiation is. It is the opening of each of the chakra points up through, raising the Kundalini up through and opening your third eye, which is the great way to intelligent infinity. Thus, the end of the experience is true life, or as you people call it, resurrection. We might call it ascension or something else as well here. It's interesting he uses that word because there's lots of religious baggage with that word as well. But I don't want to go into kind of all the ins and outs of that. in a sense, though, there is a process of, you'll talk about in a minute, of in the Queen's chamber of almost like a sense of dying, physical death, and then rebirth into a spiritual life. So it's symbolized today in many rituals like baptism, etc. Other things have experiences like that. Initiations into different groups and things have a process of experiencing almost the death of the self and then the raising up of a new self. That's what he's saying here. But it's essentially a process of purifying the in-streaming. It's clearing your karma. It's opening the gates through each of the chakra points, like we're doing in the meditation with Judy. All of these are part of what makes for the initiation, because the initiate is one then who has the ability to go to the king's chamber and orchestrate the healing process for those seeking healing. And the only reason they are the ones that can do that is because they're now in alignment with the energy and can get a sense intuitively of what needs to happen to heal this person. Much like many of the people on this call have gifts and even practices, healing practices, where they're doing really much the same thing. Raj has built a nice big pyramid to do it. Any questions about that?
Yes, Ray.
Sorry, first of all, deeply apologize. So there's a line in the second last para, but in the experiential nexus of each moment.
Yeah. This is what he's saying is, see, that's the seeking of the creator is done not just in meditation and the work of an adept or doing spiritual things, but in the experiential nexus of each moment, living fully in the now is what I would say he's meaning there. So the true spiritual seeker who's in harmony with the law of one and the one creator lives fully in each moment in that harmony, not just when they're doing meditation or spiritual work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Ray. Larry.
Oh, go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, Ra uses this word balance or balance multiple times. And does he elaborate at all more what he meant about balance or balance one?
He will. There's two meanings. One is the internal balance of the energy chakras. Many places in the Law of One text, he talks about this because this is the process of spiritual awakening and ascension. He talks about how some people might have some chakras very active and other ones very inactive. And it's not about having each chakra fully active. It's more important to have them balanced with each other. Almost like if you have a guitar with 7 strings and one of them is not tuned, it throws the whole music off, right? Or 2 of them are not tuned, or you want all of them kind of synchronized or tuned together. That's balancing internally. He also means, though, balancing the planet's energy field. And he'll talk about what happened with Atlantis and how with their weaponry and during the second time that they were in a great deal of conflict, there was a disruption to the energy field of the planet. And the pyramids, the balancing pyramids of this on the 6 points were put there to reharmonize that energy field, the energy grid of the planet. So there's a balancing of the planet as well.
Well, that's fascinating because Edgar Cayce, in a book I'm reading about Atlantis, talks about exactly the same thing. Same thing you're talking about. And I don't think it's just a coincidence that you're doing this presentation at the time that we're talking about ascension in human evolution and awareness and consciousness, because there may be some clues here in terms of how we can actually help facilitate our own ascension and what your presentation is sharing.
Yes, it is. And it is to live the law of one, to balance your chakras, to go through and clear your karma and align yourself. If you seek the one creator, the process that Ra makes over and over again, including when he's talking about what goes on in the pyramid, is to awaken and balance your energy chakras, raising it up to opening the third eye, which is the gateway to intelligent infinity, which means Once you've disciplined yourself to the point of being able to open up your third eye, often through meditation practices is one of the greatest tools that help with that. You end up with a clear connection through the veil of linking in with that energy and the guides, and therefore you walk and live in the moment as a spiritual link, or a expression, if you like, a center of expression
Yeah,
for
Casey,
the divine to express through you.
yeah, Casey talks a lot about the law of one versus the sons of Belial, the good versus the. It talks about that struggle went on in Atlantis for centuries and centuries, which is really, really fascinating. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the sons of Baal would have been the Orion group, and those who follow that one, just different terminologies. Baal is often considered the devil in some texts. Interesting. It's interesting that Casey used or channeled the first term, the law of one, way before that. I mean, Casey was done in, I think it was in the 1920s, 30s, whenever he lived. This was done in the 1980s. And I don't know that they, although they were aware of Casey, because they did ask about him, and they asked who he channeled, and Ross said he did not channel an entity, he accessed the Akashic record. That's how Casey did it, which was interesting. He wasn't channeling, because they were thinking, well, maybe Casey was channeling Ra, but Ra says, no, he was accessing, he had the ability to access the Akashic record, and that's how he was able to link into what the person needed that was seeking healing, which is
right.
often what he did.
That's right. Yeah. And he could do personal readings for people through their own records.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So
Thanks,
in the
Larry.
Queen's Chamber, was there another question?
No, all good.
Okay. In the Queen's Chamber, this is a picture, I believe, of the Queen's Chamber inside Gaza Pyramid. And since Larry's been there, he can confirm whether that's accurate. I believe it is. That's what the internet showed me when I asked for that. He says, "Did you mean that the teachers from your vibration or density were able to manifest in the Queen's Chamber to teach those initiates? In other words, did beings appear and teach them in that experience of being initiated?" Russ is in our system, experiences in the Queen's Chamber position were solitary. But in Atlantis and in South America, teachers shared the pyramid experiences. So implied there that in Atlantis and South America, that could have happened and maybe did happen in their initiation experience. But in the Ra one in Gaza, it was considered a very solitary experience. So they would go into the experience of depriving their body of sensory input and darkness and silence and whatever, again, experiencing a sense of death so that they could resurrect or reawaken. He goes on, Don asks, in the Great Pyramid at Giza, the Queen's Chamber, as it is called, would be the chamber for initiation. Is that correct? The Queen's Chamber, Raz says, the Queen's Chamber would not be appropriate for useful for healing work, as that work involves the use of energy in a more synergetic configuration rather than the configuration of the centered being. So the centered chamber, the Queen's Chamber, was for centering the being. The healing chamber was the King's Chamber, and again, as we pointed out, was just off-center. Interesting correlation to the design of the internal workings of the pyramid and what you're using it for at the different levels in the pyramid. So there's pictures of the King's Chamber. It's in the King's Chamber that this esophagus is there, or esophagus, sarcophagus, how do you say that? The stone, basically stone burial chamber, but it wasn't used for that. And so this is where they got, I think, some of the impression that perhaps that was going to be the burying place for one of the pharaohs, but it was not. It was part of the healing process and bringing together the right energies. So we go into this. Then are you saying that there is absolutely no need, use, or good having the King's Chamber effect at this time in our planetary evolution? So Ra said some things about how we don't really need it anymore. We're all, and we'll look at some of those quotes later on. We're all, Ra says, we're all those who desire to be healers of a crystallized nature. Crystallized nature means not just using crystals, although you could imply that because there are healing processes, and Ra does go through them using actual physical crystals. but he's also referring to the healer being crystallized in their chakra points. In other words, they've activated each chakra point and balanced them. They've tuned their guitar, if you like, to be healing of a crystallized nature. And we're all supplicants, those wishing less distortions. So they were all seeking to align with the law of one. The pyramid would be, as always, a carefully designed set of parameters to distribute light and its energy so as to aid in healing catalysts. However, we found that your people are not distorted towards the desire for purity to the great enough extent to be given this powerful and potentially dangerous gift. We're not pure enough to use this properly, is kind of the read I get on this. We therefore would suggest it not be used for healing in the traditional, shall we say, King's Chamber configuration, which we naively gave to your peoples, only see it used grossly distorted and our teachings lost. So here's his slight lament as to their intention was honorable. They built this beautiful thing to help heal and ascend people, and it was distorted and lost. He goes on a little bit more as to kind of what that means. Does the shape of the pyramid itself, is that a key function in the initiation process? This is a larger question, but to begin, there are two main functions of the pyramid in relation to the initiatory processes. One has to do with the body, the first use of the pyramid. Then is the going down into the pyramid for the purpose of deprivation of sensory input so that the body may, in a sense, be dead and another life begin. So that's where he refers to what happens in the sense of initiation, giving off your old life to be centered and seek and align with the spiritual energy of the Lord One. And then how it works. In that case, I would ask, how does the pyramid shape work? So it goes on. In reality, the pyramid shape doesn't work. It does not work. It is an arrangement for the centralization as well as the diffraction of the spiraling upward light energy as it is being used by the mind-body-spirit complex. So it's a tool that helps capture this energy that's being used by the person, mainly the adept or initiated person that's already balanced. The spiraling nature of light is such that the magnetic fields of an individual, in other words, your magnetic fields in your body, are affected by spiraling energy. Certain shapes offer an echo chamber, shall we say, or an intensifier for spiraling prana, another word for energy, as some have called this all-present primal distortion of the one infinite creator, referring to prana. So it's the shape of the pyramid offers an echo chamber or an intensifier of the energy that's already there. It doesn't generate the energy, it focuses it like a funnel, if you like. If the intent is to intensify the necessity for the entity's own will to call forth the inner light in order to match the intensification of the spiraling light energy, the entity will be placed in what you have called the Queen's Chamber position in this particular shape object. So the shape of the pyramid is important, and where you are in it changes the energy experience somewhat. This is the initiatory place and is the place of resurrection. The offset place, King's Chamber, represents the spiral as it is in motion, in the appropriate position for one to be healed, as in the position and entities' vibratory magnetic nexus are interrupted in their normal flow. So your own magnetic field is influenced by the flow of energy when you're off-center position in the pyramid in a way that opens it up to being healed or adjusted, if you like. That's not what's so much going on in the Queen's Chamber or the central position. That's a balancing position, okay? Whereas if you're going into the healing position, there's something out of balance in your body. So the disruptive area of the field is able to work with your own magnetic field of your body to realign it and readjust it. It's kind of the reading I get on what he's trying to say here. So the function of the healer and crystal may not be overemphasized, for this power of interruption must needs be controlled, shall we say, with incarnate intelligence. So it needs to have an initiate, gifted, or schooled in how to use it to make it work right, or it can be quite dangerous. And he talks about the danger of it later. The intelligence being the intelligence of the basically the facilitator of the healing, being that of one which recognizes energy patterns, which without judging recognizes blockages, weaknesses, and other distortions, and which is capable of visualizing through the regularity of self and of crystal the less distorted other self to be healed. Many of the people who practice healing methodologies today, and have talked about it in our meetings in our groups, have that ability already. Okay, so the initiation of the pyramid was to bring people to a point where they were connected that way with that intuitive ability. Part of why it's not so much important that we reawaken the pyramid age is because we've moved beyond that as a society, and people are doing the work that was done in the pyramid now in their own homes or offices. He goes on, other shapes which are arched, groined, vaulted, I don't know how to say that, conical, or as your teepees, are also shapes with this type of intensification of spiraling energy or spiraling light. Your caves, being rounded, are places of power due to this shape. So it's interesting. It's not just the technical pyramid shape. A lot of religious buildings are all incorporate these kind of shapes. They are funnels for spiritual energy. The pyramid was the one that they chose to give it for whatever reasons. And in other places in World War I, he talks about how when they were in third density, when Ra was in third density 2.4, 2.6 billion years ago, their wanderers came to them and gave them the pyramids, and they were very, very helpful in the ascension of their group. So that's why they naively assumed it helped us. Maybe they'll help the Earthlings. That's kind of the connection there. So the pyramids have been around for many, many, many long eons of time. Not just the ones that are on Earth, so they're probably on Mars and other planets as well.
The
Okay,
shape is quite interesting, because even in healing sessions, I've experienced some people being put into energetic shapes like pyramids and different structures in order to do the healing.
Yeah, very good. He talks a bit more about the shape here. It is to be noted, this is following on from the last statement, that these shapes are dangerous. We are quite pleased to have the opportunity to enlarge upon the subject of shapes such as the pyramid, for we wish, as part of our honor and duty, to state that there are many wrong uses for these curved shapes. For with improper placement, improper intentions, or lack of crystallized being, meaning a balanced facilitator, functioning as channel for healing, the sensitive entity will be distorted more rather than less in some cases. In other words, you can do more harm rather than good if you don't know what you're doing, is what I'm saying. So the energy is very real and it's very powerful, and it's not just to be played with. One needs to sort of know what they're doing, is how I'm reading his warning here. It is to be noted that your peoples build, for the most part, the cornered or square habitations, for they do not concentrate power. Interesting. It is further to be noted that the spiritual seeker has, for many of your time periods of years, sought the rounded, arched, and peaked forms as an expression of the power of the Creator. So whether they knew it or not, although I'm sure some did know it, because a lot of the architecture of religious edifices has come from the roots of Egypt. These rounded, arched, and peaked shapes are facilitating intelligent energy, intelligent infinity connecting with that. So there's a little bit of his caveat on you can do some bad things, and he implies very clearly that after they left, that's what happened in the pyramids, and the Egyptians started to pervert it, and they started to use it to do harm rather than good. It doesn't go into detail of what that looked like, but that's part of why they feel they need to kind of help correct that mistake, in a sense, that as part of their honor duty is to continue to try and teach the law of one in a way that people don't distort it. Okay. So healing within the pyramid. The principle of crystal healing is based upon an understanding of the hierarchical nature of the structure of the illusion, which is the physical body. So there's a hierarchical nature in the physical body, is what he's saying here. And you might look at that from the chakra points. You need to clear the chakra points from the base up, right? And in fact, those who skip over chakra points create an imbalance, which is what the Orion group does with skipping over the heart chakra. There are crystals which work upon the energies coming into the spiritual body. There are crystals which work upon the distortions from spirit to mind. And there are crystals which balance the distortions between the mind and the body. So there's 3 levels or ways of healing there. All of these crystal healings are charged through the purified channels are, again, a balanced person that's facilitating, the healer, if you like. Without the relative crystallization of the healer working with the crystal will not be properly charged. So the intention, will, etc., faith, if you like, of the person is a key activator of whether this works or not. The other ingredient is the proper alignment with the energy fields of the planet upon which you dwell and the holistic or cosmic distortions of streamings which enter the planetary aura in such a manner that an appropriate ratio of shapes and placement within those shapes or these shapes is of indicated aid in the untangling or balancing process. So the balancing process is, in other words, untangling blocked energies, karmic blockages, etc. So here's a kind of interesting summary of his take on what the healing process is, whether it's in the pyramid or not. Most of this will resonate with those who are healers because that's kind of the experience they have, just put in a different kind of framework or wording. Any questions about that? No. Okay. So here's where he talks about when he actually appeared to the Egyptians. Don says, I see, can you tell me your next attempt to contact the Egyptians? So they didn't just contact them once. They had several contacts with them over periods of thousands of years or many, sounds like years. The next attempt was prolonged. It occurred over a period of time. The nexus or center of our effort was a decision upon our parts that there was a sufficient calling to attempt to walk among your people as brothers. We laid the plan before the Council of Saturn. So again, there's an order to this. They don't just come willy-nilly. There's people, there's beings that oversee us. There's principles of the school, if you like. We're in school and it's ordered. There's a level of who gets permission to come in and teach a class and who doesn't. So this is what they said. They went before the Council of Saturn, and thus we emerged or materialized in physical chemical complexes represented as closely as possible to our natures. In other words, they got approval from the principal, from the guys, the Council of Saturn, the Council of Seven and Saturn, that they could come down and walk amongst them. And so they're saying they appeared in physical form that represented closely to their actual physical appearance or nature. This effort being to prepare as brothers and spend a limited amount of time as teachers of the law of one. Always they're coming to teach the law of one. It is the key to mastery of the classwork in this illusion of third density. We discovered that for each word we could utter, there were 30 impressions we gave by our very being, which confused those entities we had come to serve. After a short period, we removed ourselves from these entities and spent much time attempting to understand how best to serve those to whom we had offered ourselves in love and light. So, as you can imagine, these guys didn't look human. They didn't look, who knows really how they looked. He doesn't really give an accurate description of how they looked, but it was clear they were from somewhere else. And then whenever they taught, 30 impressions is the number that he pulls out, 30 different interpretations of their meaning. And so confusion built upon confusion, and they realized it's our very presence here is making this more difficult, not easier. And so they left. Questions about that? That's also why they chose in the 80s to use a channel to relay the law of one, rather than to appear and teach somebody like what they did in Egypt, because they knew that it creates more confusion. It doesn't help. And so the best way to do it is through channeling. And he talks about channeling to another person later on, or it might be here.
There's a question
Go
now,
ahead.
right?
Yeah. So the question, previous slide you mentioned about the nave, that we gave us navely on. There was some, the people who got, no, they were nave while giving the shapes without, what was that? The word was nave, basically, that they were nave while giving them. So that was something which, it was third or fourth slide before the shapes. So they said we gave them in naivety.
In naivety, yeah.
Naivety, naivety. Yeah. So, and now the second point which they mentioned, they came for a short term. So, and then because whatever they were saying, it was having 30 impressions. So I was thinking, no, I'm not thinking. I'm just trying to connect. Their naivety, and now the language they spoke, which gave more confusion because of the multiple impressions. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Are you picking my question?
Well, let me just see if I can. The naivety actually came from the fact that their planet, when they were third density, was much more harmonious than ours. There's a lot more war and bellicose and deception here. So their third density experience was maybe more harmonious, a little more naive that way. When they saw how they benefited from their wanderers coming and teaching them and giving them the pyramids and the processes to initiate or activate and balance their chakras and to heal each other, they thought, what a wonderful gift that'll be for the people on Earth. Let's go and do that. And that's what they mean by naivety. They thought, well, it worked for us. It was great. What they didn't consider was that there's a whole different energy here, and there's a lot of bellicose, warlike, hierarchical dominance, a lot of Orion group influence here that they hadn't experienced when they went through third density. And that's how I read, when I read the Law of One, I read their expression of their naivety. So they made mistakes. One of them was this one. They got permission to come down and appear, and in doing that, it made it worse. That was a mistake. So they left. That they realized that they were being naive, thinking that these guys would just see them as older brothers and be happy to learn from them and live with them for a while. And maybe there were some that were like that, but the majority were not. And so they just decided to up and leave.
So that's super interesting one. Like they can also they can also make mistakes. So that was their experiment. And second thing, we human beings are super complex, or we, because of our all different intention on Earth, that we also failed them.
Yeah, Ra makes no excuse or even attempt to say that they're infallible. And in fact, that every level there's free choice and consequences follow those choices. And even though their intentions were pure and their efforts were done with pure love and intention to help, um, they actually brought in some information that was turned against what they wanted and created more problems, which hurt what they were trying to do and probably hurt them. And they go, goodness me, look what's happened. Let's back off for a while and see what's. And that's what he's saying there. At the bottom, spent much time attempting to understand how on earth can we help these people, because this didn't work, or it didn't work the way we wanted it to. What can we do that will help them? Is kind of the dilemma they were in. And that's why they've visited Earth and they've intervened in many different ways for thousands of years, since the beginning of our 75,000 year period here. They've been involved. This is part of their calling and mission in service, is to help not only this Earth, there are many others. And so they serve as teachers, as wanderers that do that. Did that
And there's
help at all?
another, yeah. And there's another point which just came quickly. It just passed through my mind, which has been in my mind earlier also. I have read a couple of other religions, their gurus and this and that. Their age span has been very small. Some people, even they were poisoned or killed or this and that. And now what you mentioned this, and I was thinking, is there any correlation? These masters or the enlightened beings, they came for a short time. It was already part of their design that they will be here for 10 years, 12 years, or until particular 39 age or 40 or like that. Many I read in recent times. And I was thinking, is there any relation? When I read this line, they came only for a short time and then they left.
Yeah. Well, they do say they only plan to come for a short time anyway, but they cut it short. I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I think it might have something to do with the negative entities work very hard to stop light coming in. And so if there's a being that's, and we see this in the example of Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah.
If there's a being that comes in that has a lot of light, they do whatever they can to block that or to prevent them or to terminate it. So it doesn't surprise me that that's common throughout the history of spiritual seekers, is that they tend to be short-lived, which is very sad. But that's part of the nature of the energy in our world. Yeah. I think that's about to change, or that is all changing right now because of what's going on with the change and the extension, and we're in the process of transitioning. So we're leaving that behind. Here, did I get your question okay? We move on?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, that's all.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
So here he talks a little bit about Atlantis. The ones who were in contact with the geographical entity which you know as Atlantis had conceived of the potentials for healing by use of the pyramid-shaped entities. The ones that he's referring to, so he doesn't claim that it was them, but it was another group apparently who were sixth density brothers of theirs, part of the Confederation. Remember, there's this organization, almost like the Star Trek organization, but they're not just third density beings like they are in Star Trek. These are ascended beings of all levels, actually, specifically the fourth, fifth, and sixth, and even some in seventh, although the seventh tend to not be involved so much in looking backwards. So these were sixth density beings, and they contacted and did some work with the Atlanteans to do the same thing for healing using the pyramid-shaped entities. We went before the council again, offered the plan to the council as an aid to the healing and the longevity of those in the area you knew as Egypt. In this way, we hope to facilitate the learning process as well as offering philosophy articulating the law of one. Again, the council approved. The first great pyramid was formed approximately 6,000 of years ago. I would take that time frame with a bit of a grain of salt, because so many times when Ra makes a mistake in the law of one, it's around time frames. They live outside of time. So when it comes to how many years, sometimes they often will correct it. They didn't correct this, so it's probably quite accurate. But you know, he often makes the statement, it's hard for us to estimate your time frame or accurately anticipate how long it was. So he's saying around 6,000 years ago is when they came and did the Great Pyramid. Then in sequence, after the performing of by thought of the building or architecture of the Great Pyramid, using the more, shall we say, local or earthly material rather than thought form material to build other pyramidical structures. So after that, other pyramids were built, but using basically a more traditional approach rather than their thought form approach. This continued for approximately 1,500 of your years. So from 6,000 years ago, another 1,500 years after that, pyramids were built all over the world. Meanwhile, the information concerning initiation and healing by crystals was being given. The one known as Akhenaten was able to perceive this information without significant distortion, and for a time moved, shall we say, heaven and earth in order to invoke the law of one and to order the priesthood of those structures in accordance with the distortion of initiation and true compassionate healing. This was not to be long-lived or lasting. So Akhenaten is the one that they talk about who channeled the law of one. He, again, is the famous pharaoh of Egypt who was the introduced the one God concept. Before then, they were polytheistic. So he was a rebel in that sense. Where did he get that from? He got it from Ra, and that's what Ra is saying here. So they found a channel, and there's other places in the Lord one they talks about that before they channeled with Kala and Don and them in the 80s. One other that they found they could channel was Akhenaten. And so they goes all the way back that far. That's how long it's taken them to find a group or a person that they can channel through accurately, because they're very concerned about it being distorted, and they wanted it to be an accurate channeling. They didn't want to get all messed up with our own paradigms and our own pre-programming. So Akhenaten did a good service and did teach the law of one, and that completely changed a lot of what happened in Egypt. So a lot of people know a lot more about him. There's a lot of history on him. So that's an interesting connection.
I've got a question from Lou.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Refers to the previous slide, and that is, did Ra explain, or was he asked about about how would they emerge or materialize? Was it planned to do that, like in the human form, something similar or ethereal, or was that described somewhere?
Yeah, he doesn't describe it much more than he does here, but he does make it clear they were in a physical form, and they lived and walked and ate and slept with them like physical beings. So they lived amongst them. I don't know whether they actually just appeared out of nowhere or whether they came in a craft. He doesn't get into a lot of details about that. They could have done either one. It depended upon, I think, the thing that would have made that decision for them was how would have the people responded to that. Back then, it sounds like people were a lot more comfortable, if you like, or accepting of seeing beings come down in a craft. And there's lots of depictions in Egypt of that. And so it could have very well been that way, but Ra doesn't confirm that. But they did have a physical form, much like a physical body like ours. It just would have looked a little different. However, that what difference was, he doesn't get into detail either. And they lived amongst them as as it indicates there. Okay.
Thanks, Ray.
Thanks.
So it sounds like there was like three, maybe 2 or 3 times over periods of thousands of years that they worked with the Egyptians specifically. Now we're going to get into what balancing is and the other point or purpose of it, of the pyramid. Don says, I understood you say in the earlier session that pyramids were built to ring the earth. How many pyramids were built? There are 6 balancing pyramids and 52 others built for additional healing and initiation work among your mind, body, spirit complexes. So what's that? 58 pyramids basically around the planet that are built basically for the same purpose in the same way that the or having the same kind of chambers and energy effects that the Great Pyramid has. Don says, well, what's a balancing pyramid? He says, imagine, if you will, the many force fields of the earth in their geographically precise web. Energy stream into the earth planes, as you would call them, from magnetically determined points. Due to growing thought form distortions in understanding of the law of one, the planet itself was seen to have the potential for imbalance. Here he's connecting the imbalance of the planet to the people on the planet and their thoughts or intentions, or basically the distortions, the ill will, the bellicose warring ill will is a key one. That imbalances the energy of the planet. See, we don't live on the planet, we live with the planet, and it's influenced by us in many ways, more than just polluting the air or whatever. Just our own energy does that. The balancing pyramid structure was charged with crystals, which drew the appropriate balance from the energy forces streaming into the various geometrical centers or electromagnetic energy, which surrounded and shaped the planetary sphere. So they were placed on the ley lines, on the acupuncture points for the earth. Goes on to a little bit more. Does the balancing refer to the balancing of the individual who is initiated in the pyramid, or does it refer to the physical balancing of the earth on its axis in space? And Ra basically says both. The balancing pyramid structures could be and were used for individual initiation, which is balancing the chakras. However, the use of these pyramids was also designed for the balancing of the planetary web. So these 6 key pyramids, which the one in Giza is one of them, probably the lead one, had a multi-purpose reason for them building them. The other pyramids are not placed properly for the earth healing, but for healing of the people, basically. It came to our attention that your density was distorted towards what we call, by our understanding of a third density, a premature aging process. He talks about that too. Our natural age should be close to 1,000 years lifespan. It's been cut short because of the imbalance in the energy field created by our warring and harsh and conflicting intentions. Over time, that's created this imbalance in the energy field, which has reduced our lifespan. Okay. We were attempting to aid in giving the mind, body, spirit complex, the people of third density on your planet sphere, more of a time-space continuum in one incarnation pattern in order to have a fuller opportunity to learn and teach the laws or ways of the primal distortion of the law of one, which is love. They wanted to give us more time. There's another place where he says, people don't reach spiritual maturity until they're about 150 years old. So we are perpetually living as adolescent children because we don't live that long anymore, right? And that's why, in reference to in the Old Testament, that the old patriarchs lived to be close to 900,000 years old. They were able to grow into the spiritual maturity. So that's kind of what he's referring to here. We ended up losing that. And so because of that, it made it a lot harder for us over reincarnation cycles to grow spiritually quicker. We got reincarnated a lot more, but we didn't have the time during each incarnation to really mature spiritually. And so the pyramids were trying to balance out those energy fields to increase that lifespan. That's one of the reasons, again, they built it. Make sense?
Yes. Right.
Okay. So we're almost there. Atlantis, contact not successful. So in the last session, you mentioned that during the last 25,000 year cycle, the Atlanteans, Egyptians, and South Americans were contacted, and then the Confederation departed. Okay, very good point, very interesting point. So the Confederation is who's overseeing the teaching of these people, and they oversee and they take care of the planet in a sense. They watch out for us, and they tried it with the Atlanteans, they tried it with the Egyptians, and Ra was that group, and the South Americans. Ra had some influence in South America as well. I understand the Confederation did not come back for some time. Could you tell me of the reasons and consequences and attitudes with respects to the next contact with those here on the earth? Ra says, in the case of the Atlanteans, enlargements upon the information given resulted in those activities distorted towards bellicosity, which is war, which resulted in the final second Atlantean catastrophe, 10,821 of your years in the past, as you measure time. That was the second time the Atlanteans had a catastrophe, right? So here's some interesting information on Atlantis. Many were displaced due to the societal actions both upon Atlantis and upon those areas of what you would call North Africa deserts, to which some Atlanteans had gone after the first conflict. So after the first catastrophe, many people from many Atlanteans went to other places on Earth. They had much more technology than we get modern world gives them credit for, and so they were quite able to travel. And so they were displaced from the city or the nexus of Atlantis. Earth changes continued due to these what you would call nuclear bombs and other crystal weapons, sinking the last great landmass approximately 9,600 of years ago. So that's Ra's time frame of when Atlantis sunk due to nuclear bombs and crystal weapons. They were very advanced. They blew the shit out of themselves, probably. I'm not sure who they were in war with. Some say it was Lemuria, but the Lemurians seem to have been a much more peaceful group. So interesting. And there's lots of stuff in the Indian Bhagavad Gita and that on the wars in the heavens and things like that probably refer exactly to this kind of thing. So here's some interesting insights into what Ra's saying happened. In the Egyptian and South American experiments, results, though not as widely devastating, were as far from the original intention of the Confederation. So both Egypt, Atlantis, and South America trying to intervene and teach the law of one, give them permits, etc. The original intent of the Confederation didn't pan out. It didn't result as what they wanted. Although in the South America one, it wasn't as bad as some of the others, but it still wasn't good. It was clear to not only us, but also to the council and the guardians that our methods were not appropriate for this particular sphere. What worked on their planet wasn't working here. That's basically the summary of what I'm saying. But they tried and tried and tried over many thousands of years.
I'm wondering if the Atlanteans were the ones responsible for Tartaria. If, just looking at their building structure and that sort of thing.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of their knowledge, and they were very knowledgeable, went with them because look, it says they dispersed all over the world basically, and so that is very interesting. Yeah,
and it's nice to hear Ra call Earth a sphere.
Yes.
We've got a question from Lou.
Oh, go ahead, Lou.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. A particular sphere. Yes. So these civilizations disappear. We know that already, and they were advanced. Seems like it. Okay. reasons why repeatedly they fell down
I think the
from the
key to that
spiritual
is,
side.
yeah, the key to that is this statement here. Enlargement upon the information given resulted in those activities distorted towards bellicosity, war, conflict, disharmony within self and between self and other selves. I think that's the key part. That is one big difference between our sphere and Ra's third density planet, where they were on Venus, and how they live. Okay, that's a big part of it. And part of the reason that that's so concerning is that that's what happened with Meldak, which is now the asteroid belt. They blew themselves up, and those spirits have reincarnated here. And that's what happened on Mars, who also blew themselves up, and those spirits have reincarnated here. So we have those bellicostal warlike energies in those people who have been transplanted here because they didn't complete their third density cycle and got to the point where they destroyed the planet that they were living on, and that they were supposed to inherit. So that's part of why I think is they've underestimated significantly the impact of that contentious, conflicting kind of disposition that seems to have been inherited in the Earth's energy field.
So
Okay, so
he's implying that
Uh-huh.
it was as a result of the information they gave.
No, it's because they had that disposition. They used the information that Ra gave to create more harm than good. It wasn't because of it, but the fact that they gave them information naively thinking it would help them, it did help some, probably quite a few. But the ones in power were the evil ones. And they turned it into, how do I use this to dominate, control, manipulate, and enslave people, which is the Orion Group's agenda.
Okay.
So the information didn't cause it, but the information gave them a tool that they normally wouldn't have had. It's
Right.
kind of the way I read it. Yeah.
Okay. Lou,
So,
did you have a second
okay.
question?
Yeah, and it's related. So I'm interpreting that somehow they knew that we were not doing too well, and therefore they kept on coming in order to help us or help these civilizations to graduate.
Yes.
And then in this case, they did it with Atlantis, with Egypt and Tartary and so on. And then they came finally to Egypt, and again, we fail because of this, because of the activities distorted towards bellicosity, which is just what we are experiencing now, due to the free will.
Yes.
Or, am I wrong?
No, that's right. And they did know we weren't doing well, because Ra makes it clear that they've overseen many, many, many planets over many millions of years graduate from third to fourth density. And the 25,000 year cycle is common amongst all of them. It's a universal cycle. Every 25,000 years, there's a graduation. Most planets have a small group that graduate from the first 25,000 years, a quite significant group that graduate after 50,000 years, and all of the planet basically graduates after 75,000 years. That's kind of the common one, and he even gives the percentages in other places. I think we've looked at that. Earth did not. The first 25,000 years, nobody graduated. The second 25,000 years, there were about 150 people graduated, and they were all from South America, from what he says. And that gave them great concern. After the first non-graduation, where nobody was qualified to graduate to fourth density, they started to get very concerned. And so they watched with great interest and great concern as to, boy, we're this group, this particular planet's having a lot harder time than what we've noticed historically in the millions of other planets in the galaxy that we've overseen and seen go through this process. This is a common process, but we're a little bit of an anomaly. And so they wanted to help. They wanted to do whatever they could to try and help. Yeah.
Okay, great. That makes sense beautifully. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Lou. Ray?
I got actually small but many questions. So when this was not used properly, or many people were not benefited, rather human beings on Earth, they started taking advantage of that for the wrong purpose. The Ryan group, that time, there were no steps or anything from them to stop them.
Their first commitment is to allow free will to play out, even if it's to the destruction of the planet, like Maldic and Mars did. They allow free will to play out. We must be allowed to charter our own path. So they will not step in and stop. They will try and encourage and persuade, and they'll try and intervene and try and help as best they can. But they can't take over the classroom lesson for us, right? They can't make us learn something that we're refusing to learn. They just have to keep offering the lessons.
Okay. And the second thing, Ryan's groups and the related here currently, which I right from my childhood, I've been always thinking. These Ryan groups, people and the people who are into similar life practices, negative side to say, what is their karma cycle? Because they live longer. Means it takes long years to get the effects of it. So where the karmas comes in between and play part, because it has been happening and happening and happening. I still remember my childhood, certain politicians and who were those like so-called, as I used to perceive, oh my God, such a horrible things, horrible life and the things they are doing. And until now, they're like same place, a similar place. And so where the karma theory is coming up here with the free will?
Yeah, well, karma is a universal eternal law. There is no cheating it. It's the law of cause and effect. However, the Orion group, or the followers of the Orion group, the Illuminati, the elitist groups, tend to reincarnate in the same families. And they teach their children the things that we don't know about their elitist roles. They keep their money within their families, so old money, it stays within the cycles, and they continue to have the benefits of seeing themselves in these elitist roles and using some of this old ancient knowledge that's been hidden. It's not hidden amongst themselves, it's hidden from the rest of us. And so they're able to maximize their earth experience to their own gain and benefit. They die, they reincarnate, usually into the same family line, and continue on in their steps and processes to become 95% service to self until they graduate in that sense, because they've chosen to commit to that. And it's interesting, even between incarnations, they still program their life, their next life, to allow for that to continue. And that's, again, there's their free will and their choice. Their karmic comeuppance is going to be interesting because it'll be when they graduate. Remember, one of the greatest conquerors the earth has ever known was Genghis Khan. He lived and ruled as a bloodthirsty king for years and years and years. They asked Ra about Genghis Khan because Genghis Khan was identified by Ra as a fourth density negative graduate from Earth. And they said, well, what's he doing now? And they said, Genghis Khan is a shipping clerk in a star around the Southern Cross, which is the star system above us in New Zealand. And he works for the Orion group as a shipping clerk. Well, there's part of his karma comeuppance. He lived as a king on Earth, ruled and reigned and conquered, and now he's basically a janitor, shipping clerk, whatever, the very kind of what sounds like a low-level, diminished position, because he has to start at the bottom of the run in the hierarchy of the Orion group. You don't start as a general, even if you are a general in Earth life. You start as a private, and you become a corporal, and then a sergeant, and then you go up ranks. Takes thousands and thousands of years. And are enslaved. He's voluntarily allowed himself to now be enslaved. So he is the slave of the Orion group. and will be for many, many years as part of what his karmic comeuppance is. That's part of what he chose.
And
Does that
here,
help?
if I take, yeah, and here I take another, just on the side, the people other side who have been praying, asking for the help for all these hundreds of years. For instance, Maori, let's say, for example, they always invoke their ancestors and all the powers to come and help and to guide and everything. So here the free will is already used. So is still they are imbalanced? That these, a very scanty number of people, are they more powerful than these other people? And if we are talking about the free will?
No, they're not more powerful at all. They want you to think that, but they do tend to keep their knowledge passed down in their family lines. So they tend to have a better framing on what's going on. The rest of us are a lot more confused because of all the religions and things can get very confusing because there's little bits of light in each of them, but they aren't a coherent story. The Orion group and the Illuminati groups tend to keep a coherent story within their family lines. And so they're a lot clearer about their agenda and what's going on, but they keep it secret to themselves. It's their own. That's where the satanic rite stuff comes from. We learned all about that in the last Cosmic Cuppa, or some about that. They're very, very secretive about it, but they pass it on to their children and in their family groups that way. Whereas the rest of us remain confused about what the hell is really going on this planet, right? Now, we can come out of that confusion by seeking light and truth and seeking to be guided and learning to challenge our own paradigms. One of the biggest blocks we have is we have our own paradigm framing that won't let us see the truth when it's in front of us because it doesn't fit with my current belief system. So it's very important to be willing to challenge that. That's what happens when you truly unblock and clear each of your karmic chakra points. Unblock them, challenge yourself to look at what do I believe about myself? What do I believe about how I use power? What do I believe about what love is? What's wisdom? You know, what look at go through that process and clear out. And you can't just do it once. It's a lifelong pursuit of returning and going layer upon layer, deeper, deeper, deeper. And that slowly the guitar string gets tuned. Right? Have you ever seen someone tuning a guitar? They don't just get one string and go bing, fix it, it's good. No, it takes them like 10 minutes on each string. It depends how good they are, of course, but they're binging it and they're tightening it, loosening it until they get the tone, they get it just right. Then they do the next one, then they come back, they go back and forth. It takes a little while to tune the guitar. It takes a little while to tune your chakra points too. So give yourself permission to do it and repeat it and continue to maintain it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the last question, which I wanted to ask from the beginning, but I think it might be coming up. The accessibility, availability, and the potentiality, or whatever the words you may put, of these pyramids with which, as a healing center, how, in today's world, what exactly is the beneficial, how should I put it? In today's time, the pyramids, the purpose these were created, the potentiality it was created, how much it is accessible, and accessible and available, yeah.
Well, let's talk. We're going to look at that right now. This is the last. Okay. I think I'm on to the last two slides. We're just going to talk about using the pyramid today and what's the alternative, etc.
Excellent. So, that was the question. That's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So here we go. Is there currently any use of the pyramid shape at all that is beneficial in today's world? So again, this is 1982, I think it was, 81. This is in the affirmative, if carefully used. The pyramid may be used for the improvement of the meditative state as long as the shape is such that the entity is in the Queen's chamber. So that's the area where again, you go through your chakra points and balance yourself. Or entities are in balanced configuration about the central point. The small pyramid shape placed beneath the portion of the body complex may energize the body complex. This should be done for a brief period only, not to exceed 30 of your minutes. So what he's talking about is if you have a small pyramid shape, doesn't matter how small, it can be a little tiny one, you can either put it under your pillow for 30 minutes, or you can put it under your chair when you meditate for 30 minutes, and it will have the impact of using the spiraling energy that comes out of the apex point of energizing you. Now, Don does ask at one point that's not in here, well, what if you do it longer? And he says it'll be like overcharging a battery. So if you do it too long, it'll have the effect of like, so you'll start to feel kind of out of balance. But 30 minutes a day using a small pyramid, again, it doesn't have to be hollow. Most of everything that's solid is empty anyway, right? It's the shape that creates that vortex. It doesn't need anything more than just that shape. The only thing that they say is don't get one made out of ferrous metals or magnetic metals, because the magnetism impact can change the way the energy works and it blocks it. But any other material is basically fine. So there's another way, a benefit you can get that you'll find it quite interesting to play with that. Just think of the time frame that he puts there. The use of the pyramid to balance planetary energy still functions to a slight extent. But due to Earth changes, the pyramids are no longer aligned properly for this work. So the Earth shifted, the magnetic field is not now, so they're not aligned with the magnetic field like they were when they were first built because of some of those changes. And so they're not doing as well as they were. Then Don goes on. Then is the large underwater pyramid off the Florida coast one of the balancing pyramids that Ra constructed, or some other social memory complex? If so, which one? That pyramid, which you speak, was one whose construction was aided by 6 density entities of a social memory complex working with Atlanteans prior to our working with the, as you call them, Egyptians. So he's talking about the Bermuda Triangle. There's a pyramid under that was an Atlantean pyramid. And that's what's creating some of the results of the Bermuda Triangle. And finally goes on, is the large pyramid at Giza still unable or usable for this purpose, or is it no longer functioning? That, like many of the other pyramid structures, is like the piano out of tune. It is, as this instrument would express, meaning as Carla would say, plays the tune but oh so poorly. The disharmony jangles the senses, or sensitive. Only the ghost of the streaming still remains due to the shifting of the streaming points, which is in turn due to the shifting electromagnetic field of your planet, due also to the discordant vibratory complexes, meaning bellicose, warlike discord in the people of those who have used the initiatory and healing place for less compassionate purposes. So when they started to distort how to use the pyramid in Giza, it has created some of this imbalance. Is kind of how I read that. So there we are. A lot of information. Sorry, I didn't mean it to go this long. How long was it? It's 2 hours, but I apologize for the fact that it went a little bit longer, but you had some really good questions, and let's see what, oh, I'm forgetting how to turn this off there. Okay, there we go. Let's just see if there's any final questions or roundup comments. Ra gave us a lot of good information about the pyramids and about some ancient societies that I think are interested to a lot of people. So, oh, it's a good sign Larry stayed on. If Larry stays on, it means he didn't get too overwhelmed. Thanks for hanging in there, Larry. You have any questions?
Well, it's a lot to take on. There's no question about it. But I've also had a really busy day. A lot of walking up and down hills and all that. So it's partly that. But I decided I'm going to hang in there for the very end. I don't remember during my tour, I had just one person tour. We're going into the Queen's Chamber. I must have, but I definitely remember the King's Chamber and going up there and going, this is not meant to be for sarcophagus, and that's not what it's intended for. And it was kind of like I knew loud. It was just bullshit that we were taught. And of course, being taught that the Jews were used as slaves to build the pyramids and whatever sort of stuff. It's just one big, huge, fantastical lie. I think we all realize that now. I mean, I think this is pretty fascinating. Is there another follow-up you can do with the pyramids? Is this it in terms of Tisha Rala, one about pyramids, or is there more information you could share with us in the future?
Well, there's more information in there on it, but this is the summary of the gist of it: how it was built, why it was built, whether they still work. The whole point of them was to help people ascend into the Lord One. The Lord One is all about your activation and your ascension into connecting with the divine.
Exactly, and that's my point. That's my request. Could it be beneficial of interest to others if we could focus on certain aspects of your presentation went through about balancing chakras and all that could be relevant to us today, coping with the day in terms of our contribution for humanity, towards humanity, of raising our level of vibration and moving more towards ascension, so we don't do the same thing we've done before again and again.
Yeah, it's a great question, Larry, and I would like to redo one of the ones that I did. The very first one I did was on balancing, clearing your karma, and the reason that was first is because that's the essence of what the Lord One is teaching about our ascension. That is what happened in the Queen's Chamber. And so I'm thinking that maybe, and you know, talk to Lee about this, but you guys can have input into it. Maybe the last one we do this year, we could redo that one from the perspective of energy, your energy points, what happened in the pyramid, what's the Lord One really trying to teach us. And it really is that. If they could just have 1/2 hour to say, teach something the most important, I think that's what they teach, is go into meditation, clear each of your karmic centers, do something like Judy's meditation, or you know, there's many ways. They don't prescribe one way, but all of what they're prescribing is similar in that they're talking about raising your kundalini, opening the third eye, and making your own connection with the divine, and having that experience of living and walking in each moment in line with the divine. I think we could go back and do that again, and it'll have a whole different ring to it now, because we have such perspective on everything else that Raz taught.
I think so too, and it's a shame that Judy isn't feeling well enough to join us this evening, but I have a feeling that Judy and Divine Mother would have a lot to say about the season presentation, and can chime in terms of her meditation, in terms of understanding chakras and all that. But I mean, we might as well leverage as much as we can of who we have here, in terms of what can we utilize in terms of our own ascension. What can we do here to assist ourselves as well as all of humanity? Because I think we're at that point, where the breaking point, where something's going to have to give pretty soon. Yeah, I will say this too, in a personal sharing. It was a hot August afternoon. I was lying at sarcophagus for like 15-20 minutes all alone, just with Helen Barnes, my New Zealand friend, Kiwi guide there, standing beside. Nobody else is in there for quite a while. I had this huge fear of being locked in that King's Chamber overnight by myself. It just felt like that's not what I want to happen.
It would, yeah. I bet it felt quite claustrophobic. Imagine being in there with no light.
Oh, that's exactly right. Yeah. That was very interesting. But thanks so much, God. It's been very, very interesting.
Thank you.
Could lead to some very interesting dreams for some of us tonight.
Yeah, and I'm welcome to do follow-ups on it, where we can discuss it as people ponder it. And Lee, please feel free to share the video with whoever's not here. I'll leave it to your discretion as to who you would like to share it with. It's fine with me. And happy to entertain other questions. And if there's follow-up things we can do with, you know, we're all on the same path trying to clarify what's going on. Ra's been trying to teach this not only to this planet, but many planets. It's the process that we need to understand to embrace the change that's upon us. whether we want to or not. It's upon us.
Yeah. Scott, I think you might find a book by Elizabeth Haich, Haich, called Initiation. Very interesting. She does a past life thing there where she remembers being initiated as a priestess in service to Ra by her uncle, whose name was spelled almost identical to the one you mentioned.
Oh, wow.
There's a comment in there in chat there you might find quite interesting.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Larry. And also, Scott will send me the file so I can put it on the website as a PDF form for you after. And
Lee, can that file in this presentation be shared with people outside of 5D, or is that strictly just for 5D?
I'm happy with them sharing it. If you are, Lee, I'm not precious about that at all. If it generates more interest and I wouldn't want to see someone else using it as their own. But I mean, that's always a risk, and it's not like it's going to break my heart if they do. And in some ways, that's a compliment. So I'm happy to if you want to share it, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Question from Ray.
Yeah, actually, my question, when Larry mentioned that he visited, I was thinking among our group, is there anyone who have recently or anytime visited these pyramids? And what was their experience? And also, I want to share my own experience, which until my last visit before coming to New Zealand, I went to Mexico and I visited the pyramids there. I don't know, but at that time I was fully off. Like out of 5 days, I went for my last international conference paper presentation from Botswana. And then after that, I was supposed to come to New Zealand. I just went there, and within 15 minutes, I came out. I came back. I was like, super no. I don't know what was that. So many times I thought about it. Was it because I was fully closed there? I closed in the sense, not a very good state of mind. Or similarly, if other people like Larry has expressed his experience. So do we have any other experience like that, their own individual life experience with pyramids? Maybe for the next session, our follow-up on this. Just a thought.
Thanks, Ray. I use pyramids, and my mother always put us under a pyramid when we got home from school to do our homework underneath them. But I guess these days we can align them correctly, whereas, like Ra was saying, nowadays those original pyramids are no longer aligned correctly. So perhaps they're not going to emanate the same kind of frequencies that they used to.
Yeah, I think it depends again on what you're using it for. Like he said, it's fine to use the Queen's Chamber position for meditation. It can be helpful, but they're not resonating with the Earth's magnetic field like they were. And if you don't know what you're doing in the King's Chamber position with the healing thing, you could hurt somebody. And so it's better not to kind of just play with that, because who knows what that means. He does say they can be dangerous if the person's not familiar. I think what he says later on about healing is there's a lot of people in the world now who have the healing ability that they can do, and they don't need to go into the King's Chamber to offset it. They're aligned enough with their chakra points that they can bring the energy into doing their work wherever they're doing it. And I'm sure there's plenty of people in the group that do that. Whether it's all of the modern kind of new age healing remedies seem to be quite effective when done with the right intention. So intention is key, I think, in all of it. Yeah.
That positioning is really interesting, because I have some friends that live just north, and they built a pyramid house and they live in it, And when I go in there being sensitive to energy, I get quite wobbly. And now thinking about that King's chamber, Queen chamber positioning, their bedroom is in the King's chamber position. And
Yeah.
and she is very sick. So that yeah, that I find that really interesting. They should probably shift the position of the bedroom.
Yeah, they might want to try some things like that. Again, a lot of people in naivety try things that look good and sound good, and sometimes can hurt themselves without knowing. And I think that was Ra's fear. That's what he put that warning in there, because it doesn't have, it could be he says any of these oval type shapes. It could be an arch shape, or it could be a teepee shape. Depending on, they all have a way of funneling the energy. Although I think the teepee one's interesting. I think the American Indians had a sense that there was a harmonious energy, and it always felt like when you went into a teepee, it felt very peaceful, kind of. I don't know. You might have had more experience with that, Lee.
Yeah, they are
Did you
very
get
peaceful.
into a teepee? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And also the Tartarian, the parts of the building that were the energy devices or the energy collectors were the big round, like you see on the top of the one I mainly think of as the one in Ontario, Canada, but they have the big round copper tops.
Yes.
They were the energy devices in there.
And another thing, a lot of the ancient churches and that have the big spiral, almost a pyramid on top of the building. Ra even mentions that a little bit. There's reasons for that. It's not just looks neat. It has an energy purpose.
Wow, well, thank you so much again. What a wonderful evening. I think pyramids fascinate everybody. So yeah, really, really awesome. Thank you for your time and effort.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed teaching it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Beautiful.
Scott. Thanks, Lee.
You're welcome.
It was awesome.
All right, so the next one, the Karma one, we're doing on the 17th of December.
Yes,
So,
and then we'll take a break for Christmas, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Everyone.
Have a good evening.
Take care. Bye-bye.